Hey everybody, this is Atesh, and this week I'm back with an interesting topic. We're talking about the differences and similarities between Turkish and Western music. In the first episode of Making Modern Metal Composition Essentials, I talked about what makes us special. One of the parts I talked about was what we listen to and how that shapes us into a musician that we are today. And as I was giving a little summary on my musical journey, I explained how Turkish music played a part in my musical character. If you haven't seen that, click up here. Now, let's start with the differences. Traditional Turkish music doesn't work on a well-tempered tuning system. So yes, we are talking about microtones. As you might know by now, I am from Turkey. And for those who don't know, this land used to be Ottoman Empire before it was the Republic of Turkey.
Now, shortly, music had a really important part in Ottoman Empire. In the palace, especially late Ottoman era, sultans were really into music. They were educated in music. They invested in hiring professionals from other regions and cultures to invent a new note writing system. And some sultans were even composers and came up with their own musical scales. So obviously it was important in the society in other ways as well, such as music therapy. Music therapy in Turkish culture goes back to pre-Islamic era, so Ottomans carried the tradition. Music therapists in Ottoman Empire used certain musical scales to treat all kinds of conditions, both physical and mental. There were numerous books about music therapy written between 17th and 19th centuries. Another important use of music in the Ottoman Empire was the mehteran, a military marching band which is thought to be the oldest in the world. This marching band was a part of military campaigns and used the sound as a means to scare the enemy, among other uses. Mehteran also influenced European composers such as Mozart and Beethoven. One example is Mozart's Turkish March, as you can tell by the name. If you look at the left hand in that piece, that is exactly the same rhythm. And consequently, it was also important in all levels of society, and it was a part of everyday life, unsurprisingly.
I think the concept of microtones is really fascinating. In my opinion, that is one concept that hasn't really been used in Western music all that much. It's relatively new and fresh in Western music, and it gives a new perspective and more space to people from this side of the world. And even though it's being used more these days by people like Jacob Collier and Adam Neely, what I'm talking about is a totally different use. It's more the traditional way. Think Rattlesnake by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. The biggest difference is the Eastern music relies solely on the melody and the rhythm. There's no harmony. Since you don't have chords, you have to compensate for what you lack from the harmony. As a result, you end up with more colorful melodies and rhythms. The reason why Western European harmony and microtones don't go so well together is that you can't use the same system for them. I mean, you can, but you can't expect a great result. Unless you have a clever solution, these clashing notes will cause an unrest in our ears. This is also because the distance between notes in a Turkish scale will change, or I should say the scale itself will change. In well-tempered tuning system, a major second can be divided into 3 parts. Well, depending on how you're dividing them. So, for example, from a C to D, you have C, C sharp, or D flat, and D. In Turkish music, a major second can be divided into 9 parts. And because of that, there are lots and lots of scales, which are called makams. Now, for makams, it's not only the group of notes, it's how you play them that comes into play as well. There are more than 500 makams, although there are about 100 that are being used in general music today. So generally, by now we are used to hearing Western harmony in well-tempered tuning. And a microtone you'll play in that system will not really match the scale, but it will in some cases. There are ways you can get away with it. Say you're playing a 1-3-5 chord and you're adding the second degree microtonally, which would be a little sharper. That way you can get away with it a little bit. What I do is I either use a faster microtonal pass, or if it's something really important and audible, I don't use harmony in the rhythm. I might use a one-note rhythm in the lower octave and keep a pedal point, gent, if you will. So that's the first difference. Another difference is the arrhythmical stuff. And what I mean by that is a piece of music that is free of rhythm. Of course, there are examples of this in Western music, like the Shine On You Crazy Diamond by Pink Floyd, but it is much more common in Turkish music. This is used to connect two pieces of music together. Say you have two songs in different keys or scales. You play this piece of music in between to connect these two. This is called a taksim. The main goal here is that your audience shouldn't really feel the change in the structure of the scale, which is really different from jazz, for example, where you change the scale in every chord that's being played. The art of masterfully executing this lies in how and when you introduce these new notes.
This isn't the only type of taksim. Even a more common type of taksim is just in one makam. It might modulate, but will come back to the original makam. But generally, it serves the same purpose, getting the audience prepared. In that sense, a taksim will start in a lower register with less movement and increase speed and travel to higher registers as it goes. And of course, taksims are always improvised.
So as you can see, there's much more a mood thing going on here. Your audience get used to one scale and you kind of ride that emotion. Another difference is in the Western music, the regular time signatures are more even, like 4/4 and 3/4. Whereas in Turkish music, it would be really common to have time signatures like 9/8 or 7/8, all sorts of stuff. Remember, we don't have harmony, so we gotta make the rhythm and the melody count. All right, let's talk about the similarities a bit, starting with the scales, specifically modes. So most of us know the ancient Greek modes, right? Like Dorian and Phrygian and Aeolian. For those who don't know, if I take a major scale and start playing a scale of 7 notes, say I have a C major and I play from C to C, that's the major scale. This is also known as Ionian. But if I play from the second to the second, that will be Dorian. If I start from the third one, that will be Phrygian, and so on. If you don't know these modes, I suggest you go check them out. Now, these modes are quite common, but what we almost never speak about is how these were not always in well-tempered tuning. They used to be microtonal before the invention of well-tempered tuning. And they also coincide with some of the Turkish scales. If you look at these modes, you'll realize they were named after ancient Greek cities and people. Like Dorian scale is from the Dorians and Phrygian is from Phrygia. Well, Turkey, Anatolia or Asia Minor is very close to these lands, or in some cases they were right here in Anatolia.
If you look at the names of these modes, you have Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian respectively. These were civilizations and they were inhabitants of the Aegean Sea. As you can see in the map, we can actually locate where they lived. You have Ionians, Dorians, land of Phrygia, Lydia, Aeolia, which is also known as natural minor scale in music, and Locris, as in Locrian mode.
So it's no surprise that these scales, or modes I should say, stay in this geography. But what happened westward is the scales had to adapt to the sort of newly invented, well-tempered tuning system. But of course, they stayed the same here. I'm not a big expert on Turkish classical music or Turkish music theory, but let's see some examples. This is Dorian. And this is a Turkish scale called Hüseyni, played in a well-tempered instrument. Or Phrygian. Or as we know it, Kürdi. Or the dominant Phrygian, or as we call Hijaz, which is a really common scale in Turkey and Balkans and Arabic culture, or in Spanish flamenco music. But let's not dive deep in the world history right now. Notice something? They're the same.
Here's a list of some scales that exist in both cultures. On the left, you'll see the Western versions, and on the right, the Turkish versions. I'm using the Turkish scales in well-tempered tuning, as if you're playing these on a piano. And as you can see, once we exclude the microtones, we have exactly the same scales, just different names. Also, even though Phrygian dominant isn't one of the 7 Greek modes, I wanted to include that because, first of all, it is a version of Phrygian, and secondly, it is a significant scale for the Middle East and Eastern Europe.
Now let's see what happens if we incorporate microtones. I don't have a microtonal instrument, but I can get those microtones either by bending or using a slide. Another similarity is that when you're playing a melody that's ascending, some of the notes are going to be sharper and they're going to be flatter as you're going down. This can be seen clearly in the melodic minor scale. That brings us to the end of the episode. I hope you liked it, and I hope it gave a little insight of how Turkish music and Western music differ, but also they are a little similar. I believe in today's music, it's really great to have these local music elements. And microtonal music is definitely one element that can expand the current prog or modern metal. I believe we should make music as accepting and as colorful as possible. And of course, we should be open to change. And of course, if there's any music that you like around the world, feel free to use it. A great example for that would be Matthias Eklund, Freak Audio Lab. So, where are you from? What unconventional elements do you use in your music? Let me know in the comments section. I am very curious about all this. Please press like if you like this video and subscribe if you haven't. And please share this video with your friends who are into unconventional ways of making music. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Until next time.